Hello, and welcome to the Policy Handbook and Partnerships class of the All Our Kin Virtual Business Series. My name is Joel, and today we're going to focus on how to develop strong relationships with your clients. Do you ever feel confident about the relationships you have with families? If so, what specifically did you do to establish those partnerships? If not, what steps can you take to get there? In this class, we will talk about the interactions with new clients that create the base for strong partnerships, especially that first interview with new families. We'll also talk about written document that's extremely helpful for forming strong relationships, the Policy Handbook, which you might also know it as the Parent Handbook. First of all, let's review. Who is the client of a family child care provider? It's easiest to answer this question by thinking about who looks for a program and decides which one to choose. Of course, it's not the child who searches for the provider, and it's not the subsidy system or the food program. It's the parent or guardian who enters into an agreement with a provider. In other words, the client is the family. Last class, we learned how contracts are related to two terms, time and money. Do you remember we talked about a metaphor of buying a new car? A contract is like the loan agreement you sign in the office of the dealership, while the policy handbook is like the manual you find in the glove compartment of the car. It's a thick booklet full of useful information about how to use your car. It's not a legal document, and you don't have to sign it. The car manual doesn't have any payment terms in it. In fact, it includes everything except information about time and money. While a child care contract and policy handbooks are both tools to communicate with your clients, you'll notice the same differences as with a car loan contract and a manual. For example, a child care contract is legally binding, while a handbook is not. A contract is related to time and money, while a policy handbook is not. A policy handbook can be much longer than a contract. A contract must be signed, while a policy handbook doesn't need to be. So this brings us to the question, what is a policy handbook? Take 30 seconds to write down what you think a policy handbook is. A policy handbook is a document that includes information about you and your business, such as your program policies, procedures, expectations, and philosophy of early education. For example, this is where you communicate to families about your diaper change policy, how often you take field trips, or what clothes to bring for your child in different seasons. You can also discuss supplies, drop-off procedures, or whatever other procedures or policies that you want families to know about. It's important that the contract and policy handbook are separate documents. Why do you think this is? I can think of 3 reasons. First, keeping the contract simply focused on time and money makes it clear to the customer that they are paying for your time to take care of their child. Second, having a policy handbook that doesn't need to be signed gives you flexibility to change policies without needing signatures from families every time. For example, if you change your field trip policy to say you take 1 field trip a month instead of 2, you don't want to have to get signatures from every client. Of course, it's important to inform them of the change and update your written handbook. If you change a term on your contract, such as raising your prices, your clients will need to re-sign the agreement. But if the contract is separate, it's simpler because there won't have to be a review of all the program policies again. The third reason is to keep these documents separate, is to avoid the confusion between what is and is not legally enforceable. For example, in a case of a lawsuit, a judge will only enforce terms regarding hours of service and how you are paid for them. A judge will never preoccupy him or herself with, for example, the fact that you didn't take a field trip once a month, even though your policy handbook says you would. That's not a legally enforceable issue. Think about what you want to communicate to families besides clauses related to time and money. You might want them to know things like who you are and what your background is, what their responsibility is as a client, what your philosophy of a child care provider is, if you have a curriculum and what activities you would like to do with the children, the health and safety procedures you've implemented, policies around pickup and drop off, and so much more. Before working on a specific policy, we want to think about policy handbook as a whole. If you haven't previously developed a policy handbook, that's okay. You can start it today, and that is a wonderful first step. We're going to think first about which policies you already have, which you would like to update, and which you still need to create. As you do this, think about challenges you've had in running your program. Don't feel overwhelmed. It might take years to fully develop a policy handbook, and it'll happen one step at a time. For your homework today, find a piece of paper and draw 2 vertical lines on it so that you have 3 columns. Label one column already have, label another want to have, label the third not necessary. When I read out a sample policy, write it down in the column that you feel it belongs in for your business. If you already have the policy and you feel good about it, write it in the column already have. If you don't have the policy or have a version you want to improve upon, write it in the column want to have. If you feel that the policy is not necessary for your business, write it in the column not necessary. Got it? All right, let's get started. How do you feel about toilet training policy? Which category does that belong in? Next is a policy about how families should drop off and pick up their children. Next is a policy on illness. What families should do if the child is sick. Next, what about a policy on what you'll do when a child is demonstrating difficult behavior? Next, do you want to include a field trip policy in your handbook? Next, how about a policy regarding your procedures around naps and quality quiet time? Hopefully you get the idea. Your homework today is to complete the chart you're working on with as many different policies you can think of. Remember, these policies are anything not related to time and money. Take a picture of your chart when you're done and send it in. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.